All right, so that's a very pretty picture, but we'll get to that in a minute. We'll start with the basics. Is everybody happy that that is a circle?
Yes.
Okay. And if I write it like that, we still happy that's a circle?
Sure.
Okay. So just run with it because it's going to take a while if you don't. So that is a circle where that equality holds true. What if I write it like this? So now instead of an equality, I've just got an expression. Where that expression evaluates to 0, you have a circle. And then anywhere else on the plane, it will give you the distance to that circle. It will give you the shortest distance between that point and that circle. And this is a signed distance function. And it's signed because if you are outside the circle, you have positive values, and if you are inside the circle, you have negative values. And so as you go further from the circle, it will get larger, and as you get further in towards the middle of the circle, you get more, you get bigger negative values. I can do this for a rectangle as well. This is kind of a cheat. I don't know how well the lines around the edges are going to show up, but I'm cheating on this one. You get these little angles, and it shouldn't be doing that. It should be doing these little radial curves around the edge. The function for that is a little bit complicated, so we're just going to gloss over that. And you're thinking, okay, well that's great, but can I intersect a ray with this thing? Can I kind of implicitly solve it? Yeah, kind of. So we start at a point, and we have a direction, and hopefully that arrow shows up. So we sample this function, and we say, right, well, what's our closest distance to this boundary? And that can be represented by a circle. So that's the shortest distance to the surface. So we know that it's safe to move that far along the ray, and we end up over there. And I'm really hoping that's showing up well. And then we can do that again. So we say, right, well, now that's the new distance to the surface, and we keep moving along. And eventually you'll get an approximation for where that ray runs into that surface. And now you're thinking, but can I combine these shapes? Yes. So if you have two different distance functions, and you take the minimum value of those two functions for a given point, then it allows you to join these shapes in a union operation. If you take the maximum, then you get the intersection. You could subtract shapes from other shapes, which is essentially the intersection of one shape with the reverse of the other one. And you're looking at that, and you're thinking, what the hell is going on with those lines over there? It's a little bit broken. It's not perfect. You won't get accurate values from doing these kind of constructive operations. But when you're doing that kind of ray marching technique, it'll still work. It'll slow down around those areas because the values aren't quite right, but it won't overestimate the distance at any point. But does it scale to 3D? Yeah, it does. This, as far as I'm aware, it works in n dimensions, but 2D and 3D certainly. Now for 3D, obviously for lighting you need, well maybe not obviously, but for lighting you need a vector that is perpendicular to the surface. And you can get that pretty easily once you arrive at the surface. If you take the partial derivatives in each axis, you can then construct a vector, and that will always be perpendicular to the surface because it's following the gradient of this field. So where am I going with this? Well, I'm part of a digital art subculture called the demoscene. And what we do is we create art as software. We create computer programs that generate visuals, usually animated and usually with music. We usually work under pretty tight constraints. We usually work on old hardware like the Commodore Amiga, or we'll just, on modern hardware, we'll limit ourselves with how much code we're allowed to use. So it's quite common to find releases which are like 4 kilobyte executables or 64 kilobytes, or even smaller. And so by its nature, you don't get a lot of space to store kind of real content, real images, synthesized music. It's all procedural, which means a lot of patterns and a lot of math. This is a still from one of my favorite releases from this subculture. And what I wanted to do is just show that running live. Hopefully we can get this working. There we go. So, that's running live. That's not a video. That is the computer calculating what this should look like for every single pixel on the screen, 60 times a second. And that's just built using these distance functions. It's taking a lot of spheres, combining them, subtracting one from another, repeating that, and then sticking some pretty colors over the top. And I just think that's brilliant. That's really all I wanted to share. If you have more questions about any of this, please come to me afterwards. I could talk for hours about this stuff. Thank you very much.